Hey guys, Adam Trigger here, wagertalk.com. We're back with another conference tournament preview. And for the first time ever, it's the Coastal Athletic Association tournament. Of course, the conference we all knew and love as the Colonial is now the Coastal Athletic Association as it runs from, I think, Massachusetts all the way to South Carolina. Covers almost the entire East Coast. And with me today, none other than Steve Merrill, Wager Talk handicapper, but also William and Mary graduate. He's a CAA guy. Steve, welcome in, and just tell us about your connection to the conference a little bit.
Well, first of all, I couldn't wear my sweatshirt because, as you see, it still says Colonial. Same logo, same letters, everything, but they switched that first word, so had to rip that off. So I'm going with the double tribe because one tribe's not enough, right? So we got to go to William Mary basketball here on this one. So we got an actual basketball shirt on here. So this is official. They play Friday. Season very well will be over probably Friday night. No, actually, they could win. They play North Carolina A&T Friday. It's a winnable game. But then they get Towson, former William Mary assistant Pat Scarry, on Saturday. And we'll get into some sleepers, but Towson actually is one of my sleepers, Adam. So I don't think that's going to bode too well for William and Mary. Not going to bode too well for Towson either, because then they'd have to play Wilmington and then play Charleston just to get to the finals and then win another game. So unfortunately, my sleeper wasn't much of a sleeper anymore once I saw the bracket. We'll look at that in a little bit. But yeah, they switched the name under the radar this summer from Colonial to Coastal. My personal take on it is I think it was a political correctness move, which is kind of silly. But like you said, it actually does make more sense now because it runs all the way from Northeastern and Boston, Massachusetts, Hofstra, Stony Brook, all the way down to Elon and Campbell's now in the conference as well. So it really is a coastal conference, and it's a watered-down conference. You know, they lost James Madison this past season, football powerhouse, and look at the Sun Belt odds right now. The favorite to win the Sun Belt tournament this week is James Madison. So the CAA is as weak as it's ever been, in my opinion.
Yeah, Steve, you're right about that 100%. And it really makes for, I think, an interesting tournament because this is one of the ones where, I think you could make a case that it's a small enough conference where they could still be doing the campus site thing like some of the other small conferences do. But they decided to play the tournament in Washington, D.C. I think this tournament used to be in Richmond back in the day, but now they're going with the Entertainment and Sports Arena, which is actually sort of like a perfect conference tournament venue. So this is where the Mystics play. It's where the Washington G League team plays. Only 4,200 seats, so it's kind of like the perfect size venue for a tournament like this. But more importantly, all 14 teams go, and it's a neutral court. So you kind of made the point that, this conference is a little bit watered down. Means there's probably a lot of options when it comes to actually cutting the nets down here. At least that's how I'm kind of seeing it.
Well, there's been a powerhouse team for the last couple seasons, and they were the best team again this year, at least offensively and scoring margin, and that's Collegiate Charleston. But I don't feel they're as strong as they were a year ago. They were close to a top 25 national team the last couple seasons. They're barely a mid-major top 25. In fact, when I checked a few weeks ago, they weren't even in the mid-major top 25. Charleston, though, I do like to, by the way, look at conference-only stats when we head into the conference tournaments. And the CAA used to have a pure home and home. Everybody played everybody twice, home and away. So the conference stats were as meaningful as they could possibly be. Now that there are 14 teams, the most they've ever had, it is really watered down, and most of the powerhouse teams are gone. And you're right, they used to play in Richmond, Virginia. I went up there in 2008-09, watched William Mary lose to George Mason one year, watched them lose to Old Dominion another year. Then they moved it up to Baltimore for a while, and now D.C. more recently. But Richmond's gone, VCU's gone, George Mason's gone, Old Dominion's gone. Delaware's leaving in the next year or so for Conference USA. James Madison just left. It's a shell of its former conference. Charleston's been the powerhouse team in recent years. NC Wilmington's been a powerhouse team for decades. They're still here. And then Drexel's been pretty good in recent years as well. So, it's the same usual suspects up there at the top. But I do think it's a wide open tournament. One thing I like if Eric, our producer, wants to throw up that graphic of the bracket, you'll see with so many teams now, back in the day when I started in the 90s, it was a 9-team tournament. American then left, some other teams came in, but they used to do the 8-9 game and everyone else got a bye. The 8-9 played an extra game, then you'd have an 8-team tournament. Now with 14 teams, you can see teams are getting double byes. Those first 4 are getting a double bye, which I love, by the way. I like also the home court edge. I think it makes the regular season mean more. But I do like the fact that top 4 are getting a double bye and the weaker teams have to play extra games because one thing I dislike about the mid-major conferences is that the regular season is pretty meaningless. Whoever wins this tournament is getting in and nobody else is getting in, So I like the fact that a good regular season at least rewards those teams on the top.
Now, it's something that bothers me every year too, Steve. You love these conference tournaments, but then you hate to see a team, like a team that really deserves to be there miss out. And that certainly could happen in this conference. You mentioned it. Charleston last year may have, gotten, they were at large caliber, at least teetered on at large caliber for a lot of the year. We don't have that in this league this year. There's going to be one bid, and it's whoever wins this 14-team tournament, which starts on Friday. So we'll go back to front here. We'll go 14-1, if you will, kind of via the brackets and via the matchup. And as you can hear my dogs barking in the background, we're going to see if the dogs bark at all in this tournament, right? And it would start with these teams on Friday, okay? We have NCAA and William and Mary in one of the opening round games, and then Elon and Hampton. So I'll kick the first matchup over to you. I think the key thing to know about William and Mary and NCAA is the status of Landon Glassbar. He's NCAA's best player. He's probably one of the highest usage players in this conference. He did not play in the season finale for A&T, and he also kind of had been battling an injury. So they beat William and Mary earlier this year. Of course, Glassbar had a huge game. So, Steve, does the Tribe live to play another day? Do they get revenge on Friday afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, one thing William Mary's done is they've beaten the bad teams this year. They beat Hampton this past Saturday for the last game of the regular season. They swept Hampton. They were actually a slight road favorite at the Hampton game a couple months ago. This is a William Mary team that did not win a game in February. They played on Thursday, February 29th. They went 0-9 for the month of February. That was a loss against Elon, who was also playing in the play-in round, but they were very close to winning that game at Elon on Thursday night. They did beat Hampton on Saturday. And if you look at the Ken Palms alone, they're about 20 spots higher than North Carolina A&T. Two of the worst defensive teams in the country, but William Mary is better offensively. So this is a very winnable game for the Tribe. And, these are two bad teams. Obviously, anything can happen. But if NCAA&T is without one of their best players or their best player, I think William Mary is probably the better team. So, yeah, Dane Fisher, 5th year here. He's probably in some trouble, but he might get a win and at least get to play on Saturday.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on the other game quickly. As you can see, I've got my Elon Phoenix sweatshirt on. This was one of the 3 venues in the CAA that I visited this year. Steve, we'll have to get to I'll have to get down for a William and Mary game next year, maybe. Yeah, but I did go to Elon. It was it's actually a really nice campus. I actually really enjoyed that facility. But more importantly, I think the most important thing to point out with these two teams, Elon and Hampton, is they actually finished the year relatively respectable, in my opinion, relative to what they were all year. So, Elon, 6-12 in the Colonial, but 3-3 in their last 6 games. And they may, of any of these 4 teams playing on the opening day. Now, William and Mary was really close. I think it was a game you were at, Steve, almost knocked off Charleston in their own building. But Elon may have the most impressive results, individual results of any of these 4 teams playing on the first day, with wins over Delaware and then a huge road win a few weeks ago against NC Wilmington. Like I said, they finished 3-3. They won the lone head-to-head meeting with Hampton in the regular season. But Hampton was 3-2 in their final 5 games, a big upset win over Towson. And the one thing I'll point out with Hampton, Steve, man, you want to talk about anything can happen. That's what Hampton is as big of a wild card as there is, because there is some offensive talent on this team. They have some scorers, but they do not play any defense. They can rebound a little bit, but they play no defense. And with depending on who they have in, like if they put Jerry Dang, this very sort of prolific scoring freshman, he looks like a guy that could be like a really entertaining player in this league man, they have even less defense. So, Elon actually can hit the 3 a little bit. It is a really interesting matchup here. It's one that I could see going like a number of different ways. I guess the question is here, well, do you have an opinion in this one, or do either of these teams have a chance to knock off Delaware, a team that I've been a little bit disappointed in this year, Steve? I'm not going to lie. I was higher on the Blue Hens than they panned out. 6 was a little bit disappointing for Delaware, but I'm not sure if Elon or Hampton's got a chance there. What do you think?
Yeah, Hampton, a good point about Hampton. They pulled some monster upsets down the stretch over the last couple of weeks. And, here's William & Mary last Saturday playing them, as I mentioned, winless in February. William & Mary's a 4.5-point favorite. They win by double digits, which so I was like, maybe Hampton really hasn't found anything. It's just, some random variance there for a few games. My concern with Hampton is that, as you said, they can score offensively at times, but they play very fast. They're like in the top 70 in the nation in tempo. It is very hard, as you see in this bracket, to win, was it 1, 2, 3, 4? They'd have to win 5 straight games over basically less than a week. It's very hard to play fast tempo and do that. Maybe they could do it for a couple days. Delaware's a team that blew out William & Mary on a Thursday night by 28, and then you mentioned 2 days later, William & Mary was a point away from upsetting Charleston on Gold Rush Saturday. That just shows how random this conference is. So, yes, I think any of these teams could catch lightning in a bottle for a couple rounds, but a team like Hampton or Elon, I'd be very surprised if they live to play on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about like random and just like not really knowing what's going to happen. I played against Towson, so we'll talk Towson real quick. They're the 5.
Yep.
They're going to get the winner of the NCAA William & Mary game. I played A&T, took the points against Towson, a Towson team that's been like outside the top 300 in many offensive metrics this year. They're really a team that's going to rely on defense, rebounding, playing volleyball on the boards a little bit to score. And they came out and just shot like 60% in the first half. So it's like, man, you just don't know what you're going to get out of some of these teams. And I think that makes it interesting to kind of look at some of the underdogs. Of course, we talked about William & Mary, NCAA. The winner of that game is going to play Towson the next day. And this is an interesting team. It's a team that I played against a couple weeks ago unsuccessfully. And it was a game where I thought Towson might not shoot it particularly well since they've been outside the top 300 in some offensive metrics this year, but they shot the lights out and won easily. And the interesting thing about Towson, you look at some of the conference-only metrics in KenPom. Defensive efficiency, number 1. Effective field goal percentage against, number 1. They're number 2 in 2-point percentage, number 2 in block rate. So, like, this is a really good defensive team. They're a really good rebounding team. That's really their path to scoring a lot of times. Number 1 offensive rebound percentage in the league. But their offense can go cold sometimes, which makes them a little bit vulnerable. So, Steve, talk to me about Towson a little bit. They're going to get the winner of William & Mary, A&T. Any chance of an upset there, or is this a team we should be looking at in this tournament?
Well, before I saw the brackets, Towson was my play-on sleeper team, knowing that they were like only a 5 seed. And there's a couple reasons why. First of all, you mentioned a very strong defense. I also think they're a very well-coached team. Pat Scarry, former assistant here 20 years ago under Rick Boyages, when I first started as a season ticket holder for William & Mary, and I followed Scarry's career. He got the Towson job back in 2013, and this is a team that was 4-26. He takes them over and goes 1-31. The very next year, I think he was 18-13, and then he was 25-11 his third season, just 2 years after a 1-31 start. But they've never made the NCAA tournament under him in over a decade. They're always top 3, top 4 in the conference. They have over 40 conference wins the last 3 seasons already, and they're the number 1 rated defense within conference games, 18 conference games. I like to look at those conference-only stats because it's comparing apples to apples, obviously. Number 1 field goal percentage defense, and the third field goal defense, number 1 points allowed. They play at like one of the 10 slowest paces in the country out of 362 teams. The problem, though, is the bracket is not friendly. They've got to play Wilmington in the next round, likely Charleston in the semis, and then play either Drexel or Hofstra, probably still in the finals just to win it. I will say this, though. The game against Wilmington is going to be interesting because Wilmington also plays very slow half court. College of Charleston is a fast up-tempo team. I like either Wilmington or Towson to maybe upset Charleston and make the finals. So once again, they could get a little bit of help. Also, if Monmouth or Campbell can slow down, Monmouth is actually one of the best defensive teams in the conference as well. Campbell is another sleeper for me. I saw this team play against William & Mary. I believe you saw him as well, Trig. They've got this guy from Australia who's got like a damn mullet mohawk. He was a player, and I still am surprised Campbell hasn't been better this season. So Campbell and Towson are 2 sleepers for me, but it's obviously a very tough top half of the bracket for all those teams.
Yeah, that's so Anthony Delorso for Campbell is phenomenal.
His name, yeah.
He is 19.4 points per game, one of the highest usage players in the conference, one of the top scorers in the conference. I like this Campbell team too, Steve. I'm actually surprised they didn't finish with a winning record. I thought that they could potentially play their way into the top half of the league, but remember, they weren't that far off, right? Like Campbell finished 8-10, and Delaware, who's in the 6 with a bye, finished 10-8. Like there wasn't that big of a difference between those teams. Campbell just had a really nice win over Wilmington a couple of weeks ago, and actually the Monmouth Campbell matchup that will feed into Charleston, from the 8-9 game, is a rematch of a game a couple weeks ago where Monmouth won on a half-court shot by Xander Rice. So that was a 1-point Monmouth win where Xander Rice banged a half-court shot to win the game. That could have changed things, right? Campbell would have still been the same seed, but still that cost them a winning conference record. So maybe a little bit of revenge for Campbell because, if you just look at that box score, you see them taking a loss, but I mean, they had the game all but won. Rice hit a half-court shot to win it, down 2, which was like one of the more incredible finishes of the last couple of weeks. So that's going to be a great 8-9 game to lead into the quarter with Charleston. And I think the theme sort of we're starting to get at here is this Charleston team, they should be favored, but they're a little bit of a step down from what they were last year, and they're going to have a tough time getting to the final, especially if, Wilmington or Towson will absolutely give them a game, without a doubt. I want to move to the other part of the bracket for a second. We'll talk about Drexel and Hofstra, but first, there is one more matchup, Stony Brook Northeastern. I actually think if you wanted to take a flyer on a team from like one of the, like what we'll call it, like 7 or worse, like one of like the total outliers to potentially win this thing, I think you could potentially look at Stony Brook. Now, I'm not saying they like definitely like I like them in this matchup with Northeastern per se, but like Stony Brook, they are the team that I think kind of they know what they are at this point. Tyler Stevenson Moore is a great player in this conference. And what I've noticed is they run a lot of ISO, but they've sort of accepted that as their identity. It's going to be like put the ball on the deck and have a player try to like, sort of like get the ball to the rim or get a shot on their own. So it's not like a super fluid offense, but they've really kind of accepted what they are. Northeastern, you got to see if Lucas Akota's playing because he was out their finale. Joe Pridgeon hasn't played in a while. Like that's kind of my thing here with Northeastern, Steve, is that, this was a team that never really panned out due to injuries, and now they're down there in the 10 seed. If Stony Brook gets Drexel, this was a game that was a 90-86 final a couple weeks ago. Stony Brook scoring 86 points on Drexel is a big red flag because Drexel's a team that typically relies on defense. I'm interested in Stony Brook maybe making some noise. What about you, Steve? What do you see? Drexel, Hofstra, and then you've got Stony Brook Northeastern, and then Delaware playing the winner of Elon Hampton out of that other side of the bracket.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about Stony Brook, and I'm also anti-Northeastern for a couple reasons. I mentioned how William Mary went 0-9 in the month of February. They beat Northeastern as a 9-point dog on Saturday right before that losing streak, and I think they'd lost like 4 in a row before that. So William Mary, until that Hampton win, was on like a 1-13 slide, and their only win was as a 9-point dog at Northeastern. So right away, that's a red flag. Northeastern is a team that was a power in this conference for many years. They are way down this year. And then on the other side of it, if you look at Stony Brook, they have a positive scoring margin within conference play. I think they were 6th overall in conference play. Actually, I'm sorry, fourth best offense scoring-wise. They're also one of the top defenses field goal percentage allowed, 4th overall. They're a balanced team. Northeastern ranks below them in almost every conference stats category. So I think this is a really good first matchup for them. They get by in that game. And then, as you said, they match up well with Drexel, as we saw. And I think Stony Brook is definitely the sleeper in the bottom half. And probably if anybody outside the top 6, Stony Brook is by far the biggest sleeper in this tournament that can make some noise.
Yeah, and let's go into the odds here for a second because, we've kind of gone through each matchup. It's really tough to project matchups further than like the first or second round. Of course, anything can kind of happen in these tournaments. So we'll finish up by kind of focusing on the conference tournament odds. You see one book's odds right there, and these are going to vary a little bit. If I'm the way I'm kind of approaching this, so you've got Charleston, Drexel, Hofstra, Wilmington. Those are the 4 teams that are going to get the bye to the quarterfinal round. They're all somewhat close in odds. Like, you go book to book. I'm looking, at the book on our screen and another book's basically all, they've got Charleston in the plus 200 to plus 250 range. Drexel's like plus 350, 300 to 350 to maybe 400 on the high end. Hofstra, plus 250 to plus 300 varying on book. And then Wilmington, like plus 300 to plus 350. I don't, unless you really love one of those teams, I would think you'd have to look outside the top four if you want to take a shot in this tournament, because I don't know that one of those teams is good enough to justify like what seems to be a short price on all of them. So that's kind of why I started to gravitate toward like a Stony Brook or maybe like a Towson, where at least you're getting 10-1. What is your thoughts on sort of the odds in general right here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of reasons I rarely ever play futures. I mean, first of all, big picture, long season, they're holding your money 6 or 9 months. That's obviously not the case here. They're holding your money for less than a week. So that's not a problem with conference tournament futures right now. But the bigger problem with futures is that they don't let you take the other side of that. They're not letting you take the no, they will not win.
Mm-hmm.
So all the odds are skewed with a bigger house advantage than normal. So I agree with you, Adam. I think you want to try to look for some of the double-digit teams because you can risk a little to win more. As far as those top four, I'm looking for a reason to fade Charleston. As we've talked about in the show, I think they're down a notch compared to what they were last year and the year before, when they were by far the most dominant team in the conference. I do think Wilmington is very dangerous. I think the winner of that Towson-Wilmington game can knock off Charleston. So either Towson or Wilmington in the finals for me in the top half. And obviously you're getting a pretty good price with Towson compared to Wilmington. And then in the other half, it really is a toss-up between Drexel and Hofstra. I'm not big on Delaware, so I'm going to eliminate them. Plus, they have the extra game. But there again, Hofstra and Drexel, you're not getting much value with either one. So for me, it's really Towson or Wilmington. If you're going to play one of the top four, it's Wilmington, and otherwise a long shot in Towson for me from that top half, because I'm just not really bullish on Charleston overall this year.
Yeah, and Steve, I think it's worth pointing out that like Wilmington, maybe like 3 weeks or so ago, had a real path to the 1 seed in this league.
Oh, yeah.
And then like maybe 2 weeks ago was pretty much like a lock for the 2, or like it really looked like they would be the 2. So I think you're definitely getting a little value with Wilmington because they're like the 4. Of course, I talked about like double overtime, like upset loss to Campbell. Elon somehow nipped them on their home floor at Trask, where they never lose. So like some really weird results for Wilmington down the stretch. But this is like, and remember, this is the type of tournament here, unlike some of the other smaller conferences that get right into their tournament. I think the week off, the week to regroup is going to help a team that maybe like a Wilmington, that kind of dipped a little bit down the stretch, maybe was a little bit tired. The full week off and now you're going to the neutral floor could really benefit a team like that. So, I mean, I guess in conclusion, I think Stony Brook might be worth a sprinkle at those odds. And I'm kind of with you. I think there's going to be, I think you're going to want to look at dogs in this tournament, just in general. You made the point, Steve, that it's a little bit of a watered down league. It's a neutral floor in DC, especially those earlier games. If I remember correctly, not a huge atmosphere in like the noon games here, or in this tournament in the past couple of years. So maybe there's some shots to be taken with like underdogs in the earlier rounds of this tournament. And then, like you said, a chance to maybe play against the 1 seed in Charleston.
Yeah, I'll tell you another reason I like Wilmington. Number 1 in turnover margin, number 1 in free throw percentage. All this is conference-only stats. They very well might be the best team in this conference. They're going to have a tough matchup maybe with Towson and then Charleston. But yeah, I think Wilmington might be the best team in this conference. So if I'm looking for one of those top 4, it's Wilmington. And I don't disagree with Stony Brook and Towson if you're looking for a longer shot.
All right, this was the Coastal for the first time. The Coastal Athletic Association Tournament Preview. Thanks again to Steve Merrill. You can find him at wagertalk.com. You can find me at wagertalk.com. Please like and subscribe so we can bring you these free previews throughout championship week. And that's all I've got here. That's all Steve and I have. Enjoy the tournament, and we'll see you next time.